Many consider the battle against dementia to be a race against the clock, a race against a rising tide of people worldwide who are developing this disease. But what if we could use the mentality of an actual racing team who has access to technology, an insatiable drive for innovation? What if we could use the same attitude that Formula One teams have to fight against this disease? That's exactly what Race Against Dementia is. Founded by a Formula One world champion whose wife was diagnosed, Race Against Dementia is trying to turn the tides by recruiting up-and-coming talent from across the globe. And one of those researchers joins us today. You'll hear from Dr. Cara Croft on this week's episode of The Mind Boggles. Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Greg Woods. Sir Jackie Stewart, the Flying Scot, was one of the most talented drivers ever to pilot Formula One machinery. Driving during F1's deadliest era, Sir Jackie would win 3 World Drivers' Championships and finish runner-up twice in just 9 seasons. He nearly won the Indianapolis 500 on his first attempt in 1966, and at the time, he set a record for most victories in Formula One history, a mark of 27 races that wouldn't be beaten for 14 years. But Stewart's impact has gone far beyond his wins. His tireless push for increases in safety measures have saved countless lives after he almost lost his life in a crash in Belgium in 1966. His drive to overhaul racetrack design, car design, safety gear left an indelible mark on the sport that continues today. And it's this same mentality against moving forward and improving that guides the organization that he founded in his wife, Lady Helen's honor, Race Against Dementia. And one of the many scientists who have caught the eye of the Race Against Dementia team is Dr. Cara Croft. Dr. Croft has been studying the brain for years, getting her degree in neuroscience from the University of Manchester and then her PhD from King's College in London. Currently in her second year with Race Against Dementia, Dr. Croft is an official Race Against Dementia Fellow at the University of Florida and University College London's UK Dementia Research Institute. She also was recently awarded the McKnight Leadership Award from the prestigious McKnight Brain Institute as a rising star of dementia research. And she joins us today from Florida. Hello, Dr. Croft.
Hi, Greg.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. There's so many questions that I want to get to, but I think just in general, starting with your field of study, it has to be extra difficult right now, seeing Alzheimer's and dementia being affected more during this pandemic than it usually is, and how this pandemic has affected all of us. It has to be difficult to see that.
Yeah, I think it's been a difficult time for everyone, but particularly, as you know, COVID-19 has affected a disproportionate amount of people with dementia and taken their lives too soon. So I think it's more important than ever to be researching into treatments for dementia.
What first interested you about the brain and about dementia specifically?
So the brain I find very intriguing, and back to when I was first thinking about studying it, there was just so many unknowns and so much unknown space that you could look into and think about studying. And then as I got to know more about the brain and diseases that affect the brain, dementia and neurodegeneration were the field that stood out because so many million people worldwide are affected by these diseases, but we have no cures, no treatments, and nothing to slow the process of these diseases. And it affects so many people and their families as well. So just trying to make a mark there and be able to contribute research in that sense really stood out to me.
What has research been like since this pandemic began? I know a lot of people have asked me, are people out of the labs? Are they still able to do stuff? What have you been up to since this pandemic started?
So I think one of the key things being a researcher is that you're always thrown problems that you have to solve. So for many things, we've adapted. Um, Initially, labs did shut down, but as many experiments that could be salvaged were salvaged at the time. And then we kind of got on to doing data analysis and image analysis and all things like that, which you can do at home as long as you've got your internet connection and computer. Normally, conferences are quite a big thing for scientists, so you'll go to different conferences around the world, present your research, but we've been doing those virtually and still being able to share ideas and come up with new experiments. And then back in Florida, research was ramped up again in the labs at the end of June, July, and we're kind of in the labs now on small shifts to maintain social distancing, wearing masks and things like that, but just so we can actually carry on doing experiments and making progress in our dementia research.
You talk about conferences. Recently, you were a part of the Alzheimer's Association's Neuroscience Next conference, a great example of the way that things are moving forward, and in a similar vein to what Race Against Dementia is, where it's trying to get that information out there and find innovation. And it's wonderful that we're still able to do this digitally in even a big conference like that.
Yeah, it was really great, and particularly that meeting was focused at students to present their research and then postdoctoral fellows like myself, as well as attracting some of the more famous scientists in the area. And it was a really nice meeting and plenty of exciting science going on.
I want to talk about a little of that science a little bit later in the show, but first off, let's talk about Race Against Dementia. What does this organization mean to you? How would you describe it to people who have never heard of it?
Race Against Dementia, I feel, is something that has not really been tested before. And this is obviously Sir Jackie Stewart's amazing vision of trying to bridge the world of Formula One with dementia research. And they've been raising money to fund breakthrough research with the idea that they fund young, fresh PhDs and their new innovative research ideas, and try and get them a step into dementia research. But alongside that, we have Formula One partners. So we've had visits to Red Bull Racing in the UK, and we've kind of seen the research culture there, and other different developmental opportunities, with the idea that you can bring these two worlds together and hopefully actually start making different advances, because to date we still have no treatments or cures.
It really does go hand in hand with this sort of push. Formula One is all about innovation and technology. It's the most technologically advanced racing series in the world. What of that can you take, and maybe from your visits or from the things that you have seen already in your couple years with Race Against Dementia, what have you taken from that mentality back into your lab?
So I think there's a lot of similarities that were already there before, but it's kind of recognizing those as well. But I think one of the main things is that you definitely need dedicated people that work well together, so such a team attitude. But then also the different technologies and out-of-the-box thinking just to try and accelerate progress.
And Sir Jackie himself, obviously he has the direct connection, but in true to form, as he's always been, he's helping so many more people by trying to find the answers to this. What has been your interaction with him, or what have you heard from him about how this organization is going?
So I think this is one of the nicest things about Race Against Dementia, is that Sir Jackie Stewart is very hands-on. His overall idea before committing to the charity was to maybe make a donation to a research team or try and help progress that way. But then kind of seeing what was already out there, he thought that he may actually make better progress by funding early career scientists like myself and providing them with training through Formula One and other partners, as well as giving us the opportunity to work with whoever we want to work with worldwide in different labs or different pharmaceutical industries or biotech industries. But he checks in with us. You mentioned that leadership award that I was awarded a couple of months ago. He checks in and gives you personal congratulations on things like that. We have annual meetings where he'll be chairing the meeting, and he's very much involved in our process and wants this to be successful. And I think that's different, because sometimes you could just give the money and walk away, but he's not doing that at all. He's fully involved and is super passionate about making a difference in this area.
That's one thing that I've always loved about him as a person too. You could see that when he was a race car driver, how he paid attention to details, and he was always very passionate once he dived into a cause, whether it was racing or then afterward making sure that safety standards were improved. Even on television as a commentator, his attention to detail comes through in that. It's made all the more impressive when you learn about his battle with dyslexia all throughout, and how he's overcome that and is still able to do so much of this. It's just fascinating, his life.
Yeah, he's a very impressive person, and he himself says that this is the biggest race of his life compared to everything that he's done before. And you really see that, you really feel that, and you want to make progress because of that.
So tell me how you first got connected with Race Against Dementia.
So there was an open call for research ideas, and this was to fund 3 researchers that would primarily be based in the UK, but with the idea that they would spread their research internationally as well. So I decided to formulate my research idea, which I think we'll talk a little bit about later. But I had my research idea and what I wanted to do, and I thought that it was innovative, and I thought that it would speed progress in research. So I essentially sent my proposal, and then there's quite a long process through looking over your idea of research, and then you have an interview, and then eventually I became a Race Against Dementia Fellow.
I know we talked in our emails back and forth a little bit before, but you were not originally engrossed in the world of Formula One. I imagine you've been having to pay a little bit more attention to it since then and learn a lot more about it.
Yeah, there's not been any pressure to become a big Formula One fan, but I've definitely learned a lot, and seeing the kind of really innovative technology that they have there, and just as well the kind of team mentality as well as international mentality. It's really nice to see, and I definitely think not just dementia research, but all research could learn a thing or two.
If you're just joining us, we're speaking to Dr. Cara Croft, who is a Race Against Dementia Fellow at the University of Florida and University College London's UK Dementia Research Institute. I wanted to clarify also that we say, and we're very careful to say, race against dementia because it covers a lot of different conditions. Usually on this show we talk a bit about Alzheimer's disease, but Parkinson's is in there. Lady Helen, I believe her diagnosis was frontotemporal dementia. So there's a lot of dementias underneath that dementia umbrella that is being researched for this.
Yeah, I think that's always one of the most important messages that I think about, is that dementia is a broad term for symptoms such as memory loss and problems with thinking, which you get from having diseases which cause dementia. And those diseases, like you said, Alzheimer's disease, frontotemporal dementia, Parkinson's disease, they're diseases which cause dementia.
And for Lady Helen, they've been married nearly 60 years now, and it underscores this idea that it can affect anybody. Here was a woman who was traditionally, that Sir Jackie likes to say, was his timekeeper. She was the one writing the lap times and keeping track and juggling all these different things during the race. That takes a lot of focus to be able to do that. And yet she's been affected now for a few years. And we've seen her on a few occasions, most notably some of the listeners to the show may remember we talked about Goodwood at the festival, where he had her come out when he was in the car and gave her a rose. Wonderful video. But it really shows just how many different types of people these diseases can touch.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key things with dementia, is that it can affect anyone. We're starting to learn a little bit more about it and ways that you may be able to prevent. But it's a global crisis. And like now that we're in the COVID-19 pandemic, I really think funding organisations, governments worldwide really need to see that dementia and the diseases that cause dementia, the next pandemic, that seriously need funding and researchers working on it.
Well, we're going to have to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to focus a little bit more on your research specifically. We're speaking with Dr. Cara Croft of Race Against Dementia, an initiative founded by three-time Formula One world champion Sir Jackie Stewart, meant to inject the innovation and science and the drive of Formula One into the world of dementia research. You're listening to The Mind Boggles. The Mind Boggles is brought to you by the Iowa Scottish Rite Masonic Foundation and the Alzheimer's Association, whose Iowa chapter serves all 99 of Iowa's counties. During this time of pandemic, the association remains committed to providing the resources that you need however you're affected by Alzheimer's and all other dementias. You can log on to our community resource finder at www.alz.org/CRF. Type in your zip code and see what online programs are being offered within a 500-mile radius of where you are. Just pick a time and a date that works best for your schedule. Register and take part. One thing that hasn't changed is the Alzheimer's Association's helpline, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, at no cost to you. You can call any time of day or night and be connected for free to master's-level clinicians and specialists who take thousands of calls each year. They can help to direct you and answer whatever questions you may have at 1-800-272-3900. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, always there, always free. The Alzheimer's Association helpline at 1-800-272-3900. Welcome back here on The Mind Boggles. I'm Greg Woods. We're talking today about Race Against Dementia, an initiative formed by Sir Jackie Stewart of Formula One racing fame, with one of the fellows of Race Against Dementia, Dr. Cara Croft. I want to talk a little about your research, what you have been doing in this, because this has been a multi-year effort for you. You've been researching this since you first got started at University of Manchester. The brain has always been a passion of yours, but specifically with dementia. Tell me what some of the areas are that you are most focused in when it comes to this.
As I've already mentioned, dementia is caused by diseases, and the two main diseases that I focus on are Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease. And specifically, I'm interested in both of those diseases. You get proteins that normally have normal function, but they actually start to build up and clump in the brain. And I'm interested in trying to find out why certain proteins build up in the brain and clump, and how that leads to dementia.
Some of the things that I saw in the papers that you have been involved with, you look a lot at genetic risk factors. You look at cellular dysfunction, cellular death. Those steps, once that spiral begins, and how we can start to figure those things out. You've also looked at a couple of really interesting things that I'd love to expound on, and that's this adenovirus vector that you've been using. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, so adeno-associated viruses were discovered a while ago now, but what scientists found is that you could use those viruses to study increases in genes or decreases in genes. You can use them to study cell health, cell activity, and essentially we use those as tools to start to understand what's going on in the brain in normal conditions and what's going on in the brain in diseased conditions.
And from what I had seen, you can make them express some of these protein aggregates. And you also talked in a couple of things that I read about how much quicker that process is compared to when we usually use normal animal models that you would have to procure and use that would take many months to develop. This is a much quicker way of doing it, it sounds like.
Yeah, you really speed up the process by using these adeno-associated viruses as a tool. Just for one example, so one of the proteins we're interested in is the tau protein. And typically in standard ways that that's studied, it'll be 12 months before you start seeing that protein build up. But the way we use these viruses is that we see that protein build up in 3 months. And I think that was part of the selling point when I kind of wanted to get the Race Against Dementia Fellowship, was that I've been involved in teams where we've already shown ways to speed up studying dementia. And now I want to take it even further and try and speed it up in different ways.
When you use this process, how does the model that comes out of it, how does that compare to some of the more common mouse models that you can get, or other forms of genetic engineering in terms of the quality of the model that comes out of using this process?
Yeah, so what's really nice is the features that we see and the different measurements that we make and the different images that we take and things like that. They look like the disease that you would see in an Alzheimer's disease brain. And they're also somewhat similar to the previous models as well. And I think the most important thing to think about is that at the end of the day, everything is just a model, and they all have advantages and disadvantages. But every little bit that we do hopefully brings us new steps and closer to treatments.
You also talked about tau, which is really pertinent these days because the sentiment has kind of been shifting in recent years about the importance that tau plays in a disease like Alzheimer's. That we just had a tau conference specific that the Alzheimer's Association put on just before the pandemic began. This is a really hot area of research right now. Where do you think looking into tau will take us?
Tau is a very important area of research, particularly because the accumulation of tau in the brain seems to also mimic or mirror when you see loss in memory and thinking. So the more tau you have, the more problems that you have with your memory. So the thought there is that the two must have a relationship. And I think the more we start understanding about tau's normal functions as well as what's going on in the Alzheimer's disease brain, we may be able to start moving more tau therapies into the clinic and maybe one day have treatments that affect tau.
If you're just joining us, we're talking on The Mind Boggles with Dr. Cara Croft, who is a Race Against Dementia Fellow at the University of Florida and University College London's UK Dementia Research Institute. The Race Against Dementia, of course, a project by Sir Jackie Stewart, three-time Formula One World Drivers Champion, to try to put an end to this disease or these sets of diseases that fall under the dementia umbrella. Another one of the areas that I saw you speak about frequently are risk genes. What are some of the things that you are focusing on or would like to focus on when it comes to risk genes in dementia?
One of the most important things to know is that when we think about research in universities, the things that we're trying to understand and that may become future treatments, the only way they can become future treatments is if they have the backing of the pharmaceutical industry. And the pharmaceutical industry want to fund drug targets that involve these genetic changes. So we know in Alzheimer's disease, there's around 50 genes that have been linked to developing Alzheimer's disease, and that in Parkinson's disease, there's around 30 genes which have been linked to developing Parkinson's disease. And these all have different functions in the brain. Some of them we know absolutely nothing about. And in my research, I want to start understanding what some of these genes do normally and what goes on in Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease. And obviously I've mentioned there's around 80 genes there that we can study. And so far, probably only a quarter of those have been studied in depth. So I think there's a lot of space there that maybe tau therapies aren't the correct route to study and get treatments for dementia, but probably one of these other genes may hold clues and the key to future treatments.
It's almost another parallel to Formula One when you start talking about some of these genetic markers, because their use of supercomputers and their use of all this computational power to try to figure things out is similar in some ways to the approaches that we've started to see develop with machine learning and the different algorithms that are trying to find these patterns and connections with different genes and where that could take us, and recognizing things that we previously haven't.
Yes, definitely all these different genetic technologies which have identified these genes, as well as some of the new technologies where you look at changes in expression of these genes. Yes, they definitely require good supercomputer power. But also as well, I think one of the areas that I'm really interested in is imaging. And I think going forwards and working with the Formula One partners, I think that's one area where they will be able to help, possibly with speeding up the analysis, and like you said, some of the machine learning too.
Since Race Against Dementia is about finding the cutting edge, what are you most excited about in the near or even the somewhat distant future in dementia research?
I think there's a lot of different projects out there where now working between different countries, different Alzheimer's centres around the US, and promoting the sharing of data, that is where we will make the most success. So a lot of people generate their data and it's available online for anyone to access. And I think it's through that kind of sharing and openness and accessibility is what I'm actually most excited about.
I think the work that you are doing and the work that so many others are doing is absolutely fantastic for dementia, for science in general, and something like the Race Against Dementia, by taking it from a different viewpoint, by approaching it from a different angle. I hope that we can continue to see some good innovation coming out of that. And I want to thank you for being a part of that innovation, because we are going to put an end to this disease someday, but we need people who are passionate about it to continue on that work.
Thank you. It's been really great talking to you.
Best of luck with this project, and tell Sir Jackie hi for me next time you talk to him. But thank you so much for coming on the show today. Best of luck, and stay safe also during all of this.
Thanks so much. You too.
Dr. Cara Croft, a Race Against Dementia fellow on both sides of the pond. Thank you so much to her for coming on the show today. Thanks for Race Against Dementia for helping us to get that set up. I gotta say, as a Formula One fan, growing up also with a father who absolutely loved Sir Jackie when he watched Formula One as a child, that was really cool. I love doing that. So thank you also, everybody who listened in today. I hope you are all well. I hope you're taking care of yourself and of others. Until next week, this has been The Mind Boggles. I'm Greg Woods. Take care of your brain.